What's happening everyone, my name is Alex and welcome back. For this camera comparison we have the brand new GoPro 11 and of course the brand new iPhone 14 Pro. Now this year the iPhone has a new video feature called the action mode. So what better way to test that out than comparing the iPhone 14 Pro with one of the best action cameras available on the market, which of course is the GoPro 11. So we are going to split this video into three sections. The first section has to do the internal microphones in the two devices, so we'll figure out which one picks up the sound better. The second section has to do with the stabilization, the video stabilization at different resolutions, and the last section has to do, of course, with the video quality. So we're going to start by checking out a couple of sample recordings so we can figure out which device has the better internal microphone, the iPhone 14 or the GoPro 11. Alright, so we are moving on to our first audio test between the GoPro 11 and of course the iPhone 14 Pro. Now on the iPhone 14 Pro I'm using the ultra-wide lens on the back and recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. With the GoPro of course I'm using the only lens available, recording in 4K at 30 frames per second, and I have the field of view set to super view. So this is how a recording would sound like on these two devices if you are outdoors. There is a bit of wind and maybe a bit of noise around us, but overall pretty quiet. So next I'm gonna find a more noisy place and we'll see how the two devices pick up the sound under those conditions. Okay, and we are moving on to our next audio test. Here we have a bit more noise. First of all, because we have the water right here, so there is a bit of noise from that water, and also slightly windier. Well, not at this time, but 2 minutes ago we had some wind as well. So I'm using the ultra-wide camera on the back of the iPhone 14 Pro and recording in 4K at 30 frames per second, where on the GoPro 11 I'm doing 4K at 30 frames per second and the field of view set to wide. So this is how both devices would capture sound if you have a bit more noise around you, even though it's not that noisy around here, but just so you get an idea. Alright, so for sound quality, as you've heard for yourself, there is really no comparison between the GoPro 11 and the iPhone 14 Pro. The GoPro 11 sounds better in every single way. So I think that for all the future recordings that you're gonna see in this video, we're just gonna use the sound from the GoPro 11 because the sound quality from the iPhone 14 Pro is just not the best out there. Okay, next we're gonna move on and check out some sample recordings so we can figure out which device has the better video stabilization. I mean, we already know which one has a better video stabilization, but just so we can see how the iPhone 14 Pro compares to the GoPro 11. So let's play those recordings and I will be right back. Okay, so for our first stabilization test, I have the iPhone 14 Pro recording with the ultra-wide camera on the back and I have it set to the action mode. The maximum resolution for the action mode is 2.8K at 60 frames per second. We are currently doing 2.8K at 30 frames per second. The GoPro 11 I have set to record in 4K at 30 frames per second and the field of view set to super view, and of course the stabilization set to the maximum level of stabilization. So I'm gonna start walking a bit faster and I'm also gonna start running. We'll turn left and we'll walk once again. I'm gonna start running in just a second. And we'll stop here once again. So this is how the stabilization works under these conditions. Alright, next on the list for our stabilization test we have 2.8K at 60 frames per second with the ultra-wide camera and the action mode on the iPhone 14 Pro. And on the GoPro 11 we are recording in 4K at 60 frames per second and the field of view set to super view. So I'm gonna start riding the bike. I'll try to go as quick as I can without falling, of course. We'll go right, we'll go this way, we'll go left again, we'll go right again, left again, and I'm gonna turn right here. And we'll keep going this way. So yeah, this is how the stabilization works on these two devices if you're riding a bicycle basically. But how about the stabilization on the front-facing camera on the iPhone 14 Pro? So if you're using the front-facing camera, the action mode doesn't work. So I'm currently doing 4K at 60 frames per second with that front camera. And on the GoPro 11, I'm doing 4K at 60 frames per second, and I have the field of view set to wide. We are also gonna start running in a second, just so you can see how this works if you're basically vlogging and you're talking in front of the camera like this. Okay, I have action mode, ultra wide camera, 2.8K at 30 frames per second, 4K at 30 frames per second, and wide. So we have a bit of bumpy terrain around here, just so you can see how this is looks. Quite bumpy for the bike here. You can probably hear the bike as well, just so you get an idea how that action mode and stabilization basically works in more unusual situations, I'm gonna say. I also want to show you how the stabilization works if you're not using that action mode on the iPhone 14 Pro. So I'm currently using the main camera on the back of the iPhone 14 Pro, recording in 4K at 60 frames per second. I'm doing the same resolution with the GoPro 11, but I have the field of view set to linear. So a closer field of view to the iPhone basically. So we'll start walking this way. I'm also gonna start running in just a second. So I'm just walking nice and slow, and let's run and go up those stairs. So yeah, this is how the footage will look like if you're not using the action mode on the iPhone 14 Pro. Okay, and we have one last test for stabilization. For this, I'm using the main camera on the back of the iPhone 14 Pro, recording in 2.8K at 60 frames per second with the action mode on, and on the GoPro 11 we are recording in 4K at 60 frames per second with the field of view set to wide. So let's run. We'll go left, we'll go right, left again. So this is how the action mode looks like if you're running on the iPhone 14 Pro. Okay, so in all fairness, the iPhone 14 Pro did pretty good for video stabilization. I think it did better than I was expecting, and it was kind of keeping up with the GoPro 11. Now, of course, the GoPro 11 does better for video stabilization in comparison, but for a phone, I feel that the iPhone 14 Pro did pretty good. Now, the downside to using that action mode, of course, is the fact that you have to lower the resolution. So you have to record in 2.8K at 30 or 60 frames per second. And personally, I don't think I need stabilization that bad to lower my resolution. I always record in 4K at 30 frames per second. But again, everyone uses their phones differently, so I just wanted to show you how the stabilization works on the iPhone 14 Pro when compared to the best out there for video stabilization, which of course is the GoPro 11. Okay, so next we're gonna move on and check out a few more sample recordings just so you can see how the video quality from these two devices is basically. Alright, so for our next test, I have the iPhone 14 Pro set to record with the main camera and in 4K at 30 frames per second, so I don't have the action mode turned on. And the GoPro 11 I have set to record in 4K at 30 frames per second with the field of view set to wide. So I'm just walking nice and slow. I'm trying to hold both devices as steady as possible. So basically, if you don't use that action mode on the iPhone 14 Pro, this is when you're gonna get the best video quality. So we'll walk backwards this way. We also have some stairs here. Of course, I expect that the GoPro will do much better for stabilization in all these recordings. So yeah, this is how recording done in 4K at 30 frames per second between these two devices would look like if you're moving nice and slow, of course. For our next quick test, we have a combination of sunshine and shade. So I'm currently doing the maximum recording resolutions available on both devices. So 4K at 60 frames per second on the iPhone 14 Pro, and I'm filming with the main camera. And on the GoPro 11, I'm doing 5.3K at 60 frames per second, and I have the field of view set to wide. We're actually gonna go this way. Here we have a bit of shade, a bit of sun, just so you can see how the devices capture video in more challenging conditions, I'm gonna say. I'm gonna stop somewhere around here, and we're gonna pan right slowly. And then back left. So yeah, this is how the video quality looks at the maximum recording resolution for these two devices. Okay, so here we have a bit more of a challenging situation because we have some sunshine and of course shade. So I'm doing 4K at 60 super view on the GoPro 11 and the ultra wide camera, and 4K at 60 on the iPhone 14 Pro. Just gonna walk this way, and I'll walk in the shade here and we'll spin around this way. So yeah, this is how recording would look like under these more challenging conditions, I'm gonna say. Okay, we are moving on to one of our last recordings for daytime recordings, at least. So here I'm doing 5.3K at 30 frames per second, and the field of view set to linear on the GoPro 11. Where on the iPhone 14 Pro, I'm recording with the main camera doing 4K at 30 frames per second. So I'm gonna walk this way for a bit. So kind of towards the sun, because the sun is just above us. So you can see how both cameras handle that extra light basically, and we'll spin around slowly. So now the sun is kind of behind us. Let's get closer to the water here. So yeah, this is how recording in 5.3K and 4K at 30 frames per second on the iPhone would look like. Okay, so I feel that a lot of people are still gonna prefer the footage that we got from the GoPro 11 because it has more saturation, it has more contrast. At the first look, it does look better, it does look more appealing. But I feel that the iPhone 14 Pro has the more mature video quality, if that makes any sense. The dynamic range in those recordings is better, the video sharpness is better. So for me personally, I would still choose the iPhone 14 Pro for video quality, but as I said, a lot of people, I feel that they will prefer the video quality that we get from the GoPro 11. And of course, the GoPro 11 is definitely an improvement from last year's GoPro 10. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Do you prefer this one or this one? Okay, so next I'm also gonna show you a super quick recording that I've done at night, but here, as you'd expect, the iPhone 14 Pro does better. But let's check that out and I will be right back. Okay, so we have a super quick video here in low light. It's not total darkness quite yet. The sun just set about 15-20 minutes ago. So I'm doing 4K at 30 frames per second with both cameras, so the GoPro 11 and of course the iPhone 14 Pro. And I also have the field of view set to linear on the GoPro 11. So we'll just pan this way. It is a bit darker this way, so I can definitely see way more on the screen of the iPhone 14 Pro, but I was expecting that to begin with. So we'll just walk this way for a little bit, just past these trees here. So yeah, this is how recording in low light between the GoPro 11 and of course the iPhone 14 Pro would look like. So just as you expected, the nighttime footage was better from the iPhone 14 Pro, but I kind of knew that even before I've seen the footage. So there you have it, the GoPro 11 and the iPhone 14 Pro. If you'd have to choose just one of them, which one would you choose? The GoPro 11 or the iPhone 14 Pro? Keep in mind that with the iPhone you can do a lot of other things, not only film and take pictures. Alright guys, hopefully this video was useful. Thanks for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.